Hi, welcome back. Okay, if you are here, that tells me that you are ready to start lesson 1. But in order to do that, you need to have your book with you. Do you have your book? If you don't, pause this video and go get your book. I want to make sure that you're following along with me. Okay? Okay. So if you're still here, that tells me that you have your textbook and it is open to page 106, which is the beginning of lesson 1 in chapter 3. So chapter 3 is going to tell us all about why suddenly people from Europe decided that they were ready to move and explore the world. And so as we go through this, we're going to really look at their motivations about what was going on in their world and what was going on in the world around them. So we're starting today with how the world looked in the 1400s. And that's what this first lesson is all about. If I look at this lesson, I can see that it's divided into 4 different sections. It's divided into the Americas, Europe, Asia, and Africa. And each of these sections is going to give us a little snapshot of what's going on in those places at this time, right as Christopher Columbus is entering the world as a little bitty baby. We don't often think of him like that, do we? But he had to have been a baby once. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to start like we always do with vocabulary. So on page 106, I can see the list of vocabulary that is important for this lesson. And there are a few that I want to pick out, but the one I want to start with is city-state. A city-state, if I look on page 111, it tells me that a city-state includes a city and the surrounding area. Now that's a little confusing, right? Because that sounds like a metropolitan area. But what's important to know about a city-state is that it wasn't just the land, it was that these cities were their own government, their own kingdoms unto themselves. And so it would be a little bit like if we said we are in St. Louis City and we are our own little kingdom and the police force is going to protect us from the invading armies from like Chicago or Kansas City or something like that. That's what a city-state is. And that's why a lot of the world was divided at this time in history. But the interesting thing that's beginning to happen is that people are becoming more settled. They are more secure in the food that they have and the resources that are around them, and these city-states begin to spread, usually under the influence of a very powerful emperor or king or somebody who's able to pull a lot of people together, a very charismatic leader, somebody who is able to inspire but also earns the respect of his people. I'm going to say his because it was always going to be a his. That's a different story for a different day. Okay, so another thing that's really important I see on this list is monarch. A monarch is a king or a queen. And there is really one important exception with a queen, but we're not ready to get there yet. So a monarch, if I divide that word, mon, M-O-N, means one, and arch, A-R-C-H, is a system of government. So a monarch is a system of government ruled by one person. So that's really what that means. I just have to take it apart and I know what it means. Okay, so those are the 2 that are really important for this lesson that I want to keep in mind as we are going through this. So if I begin with the Americas and I have my very high-tech map of the world, and you are going to be watching videos about each of the empires that I'm going to put on this map. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about them right now. I just want to introduce this idea to you about who's where and include a couple of pieces of information that are not in the book. So we already know from our study that up here in North America, around this time in the 1400s, are the Mississippian people. These are the people, this is the great civilization, the great empire that is expanding throughout North America, right here centered at Cahokia, right across the river from us. And so these people don't appear in this chapter of our textbook, but we know that they're there because we read about them in the last chapter. Growing down here in Mexico is the Aztec Empire. And the Aztec Empire, as the word Aztec doesn't refer to one specific group of people. It really refers to these city-states coming together under one powerful ruler and creating an empire that stretches from the Pacific Ocean all the way over to the Atlantic Ocean. And this is expanding and expanding. It's growing much bigger into the 1500s. Same thing's happening down here in South America with the Inca Empire. The Inca Empire is centralized, the power is centralized in Cusco, which is the capital of Peru today. So this empire is growing the same way. It's a bunch of city-states that have been pulled together under one very powerful leader. If we go over here to Africa, that's going to be, let's go over to Asia. Now, in Asia, there have been centuries and centuries of great empires that have risen and fallen over time. At the time, in the 1400s, we are on the third emperor of the Ming Dynasty. His name is Yongle, and he is very powerful. He unites a lot of the people in China, and he moves the capital of Beijing. Probably know that name because it's still the capital of China. He also creates this vast palace complex that's like 170 acres with like 90 different palaces in it. And it's called the Forbidden City. If that doesn't sound interesting, I don't know what is. Yongle, who is the emperor, he's the third and most powerful emperor in the Ming Dynasty. He also is interested in exploring this ocean and going out to see what's going on. Now, the interesting thing that happens here is that when he dies, the person who takes over for him is kind of a bumbling fool and doesn't really know what to do, and he shuts down this exploration. He says, nope, China's not doing it. We're not going out, we're not exploring the world. And so it raises this really interesting question. What if? What if the exploration of China had continued because they had a huge head start on Europe? Okay, over here in Africa, there is also a very big empire that is growing, and you will recognize it, I hope. So it begins with, over here in West Africa, with Ghana. I need stickies on the other side. So Ghana is a trading post that begins to grow in power and influence, because what is happening is that there are these trade routes that come through northern Africa. And so Ghana and then Mali becomes a very important empire. Sorry, you guys can't really see that, I guess. I'll try to hold it closer. And then out of this comes a ruler who creates the Songhai Empire. Now, the Songhai Empire, coming right through here, they're getting very, very rich on the trade of gold and on salt. And if you remember way back last year when we read about Timbuktu, that was the great city that grew out of this powerful empire. So, if you have been following along with the book, you've noticed that I've talked about the Americas, I've talked about Asia, and I've talked about Africa, but I've skipped over Europe. And the reason that I skipped over Europe is because Europe is not following the same pattern that these guys are following. There are kings and queens in Europe, but there's not one that's taken over all of it. They are still operating in what is basically city-states. They're fighting each other over and over and over. And so there's a king in Spain, there's a king in Portugal, there's a king in England, there's a king in France. There are kings all over this European continent, and nobody is strong enough to beat anybody else. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about what's going on in Europe right before this happens. But before we move on, I want to talk about one that got passed over entirely in this textbook, which is really, really strange. And it's the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire grows out of the religion of Islam. And it begins expanding. And it's growing all through the Middle East and North Africa, like Egypt, and it's moving up into Europe. And you're going to watch a video that tells you more about the Ottoman Empire and what is going on there. But it's a really, really important one to know about because it is becoming one of the biggest empires in the world. And it's right on the doorsteps of Europe. And so this is really important to realize as we're thinking about why it is that these European nations decide that they want to strike out on their own. And knowing that there are these massive empires around the world, and within their tiny countries, they're not really able to gather as much land as some of these other empires are gathering, is important to know. Okay, so here's your task now. You can go on to the next slide. The next slide it's basically a map of the world, and it will allow you to click on each of these and watch a video so you can learn more information about each of these empires. Once you have watched the videos or you feel like you're ready, you can take the little quiz that you can go to the link that says test my knowledge, or it says click here to test my knowledge. When you click on that link, it's going to take you to a form to fill out to see how you're doing. So just a couple reminders, okay? You can absolutely use your textbook. You can use this video. You can use any of the other videos, but do not close out that form or you'll lose any of the work that you've done on any of the questions before you close it. So make sure you don't close that out. When you are watching the videos, you probably will run into some videos for BrainPop, and I'm not sure if Miss B has had you watch those, but your password and username are the same as with her. So the username is SSP2 and the username is Science345, and I'll put that information in the assignment in case you need any help with that. None of the other ones should need any passwords. Once you have finished that assessment, you're ready to go on to the next slide for lesson 1 that has to do with Marco Polo's trade routes, and we're going to talk more about Marco Polo next time when we also talk about Europe and some of the stuff that's going on in Europe at the time, which is going to give us the background for what we need to know before we get to Christopher Columbus, actually. Okay? All right, great. If you can come back to this video anytime you need to. You're welcome to do that. You can send me a question if you have questions or any thoughts that you need help with. I'm happy to do that, okay? All right, have fun. Hope you enjoy the videos. They're super interesting, I think. And I'm excited to hear what you learn from them. Bye.